Greetings and welcome to today's lesson for CS275 database development, creating tables. In this lesson, we're going to go over creating, altering, and deleting a table. We'll talk about data types, what the primary key is, and why you would use it. Our course objectives to understand how to create, alter, and delete tables using MySQL. And then by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to create your own table, alter that table, and then delete that table in a project. So with that, let's go over the primary key first. Won't use this a whole lot right away. It's a slightly more advanced feature, but it is important that you're adding it correctly as you get used to using it. And then as we show you, the real importance of it, you'll use it more. But for now, the concept is it's to identify uniquely each row, right? So probably if you ever use Excel or Sheets or anything like that, I mean, they're kind of already identified, right? The number on the left-hand side, the row number is its unique identifier, and it's already there. However, what gives SQL the power is it can connect tables. So if you see this little picture here, you can see that this actor's ID is tied to this mapping, and this film ID is tied to this mapping. And then basically you can say that, hey, this actor is in this film because this actor and the ID are tied together. Another good example would be something like you have a bookstore, right, or a library, and you have all of the user information in there, and then you have all of the books in there, right? You're not going to necessarily have every single user attached to every single book, right? Only when they check out a book where the name come here and then the book will be tied to them. So you have two distinct tables, but you can say, all right, this person, in this case, the actor, right? And this is just a number, right? This could be 364, and this film ID we get 24, and you know that who that actor is, right? Have his name. They normally have more information about that actor, but you'd have information about the actor, but that you don't need here, right? You don't need to have all the actor's information tied to every single field, every single film they're in, right? You can just say this actor was in this film, and then if I need the film information, I can go back here and get it. If I need the actor information, go back here. But you can know that they're tied together by this second table, right? If you did this in Excel, you'd have actor, blah, 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 all their information, and the film. And then next line, actor, all their information, and then the film's information, right? You'd have all this excess information. Primary key allows you to connect other tables together, right? That's the connect other tables. Again, when we actually do this in a few weeks, this will become more apparent, but as we go, it's important to make sure that you add the primary key so you can later add that. So let's go over data types next. And that's just, what type is the row, right? The column, rather, right? Is it an integer, a decimal, double, integer, whole numbers, right? Doubles are decimal numbers. Date, time, date, year, right? What is it holding? What type of information? And this has a couple reasons. One, you can do math with these, right? So it's important that they know what type it is, so you can do math with it, right? And also it can verify, did you give me a date time, right? If I enter, I say, hello world, and try to put into date time, it's not going to work. So there's some reasons for that. And then some of these are a little bit more versatile, like blob and set, whereas text and varchar allow you to just put strings of information in there. Varchar allows you to say, I only want 10 characters, right? And we'll go over that later. But these data types kind of just allow you to know what's going into it and making sure you only that kind of information. And then you can also modify each of these columns as well and say, hey, this is not null. So that means it can't be empty, right? So if you have a first name, last name, you're like, no, they need a first name, they need a last name, or they need an email address, whatever they might need. That column, if it can't be null, you can't leave it empty, then you put that there. If it needs to be unique, like you're creating an employee ID number, right? No employee can have the same ID number. You put the unique thing on there, so when it tries to go into there, if there's one already there, it's like, say, you can't do this, that's already there. Auto increment makes it go automatically up by 1. And primary key we just went over. Normally a lot of these get tied together, like primary key, auto increments. So when you add something to the database, the primary key just goes to the next one, 2, 3, 4, and so on. It just keeps going up every time you add something new. You don't actually have to know what the last one was added and then figure it out and add the next one, as we'll see when we get to inserts. But for now, again, some of these things you need to understand, because as we actually build it, right, then you need to know, right, I have an ID, it's an integer, it's not null, blah, blah, blah. So this is just an example of kind of what it looks like. So some key commands that we're going to use in just a second. Use in MySQL tells the program which database to use. All right, and that's important because you have a bunch of different ones to use. Show tables does what it says it does. It shows all the tables that are in there, which is important because sometimes you forget the exact name. Do you have uppercase, lowercase, right? So it is sometimes useful to be like, well, what tables are in this database? Explain. We'll actually get more detail about those. What is in the tables. This is just the tables. What's in the tables, and then drop table can delete a table, right? So as I said, you'll be skilled at. You'll go ahead and create a table, and then you'll drop that table, right? But the key command to create a table is create table, the name of the table, and then essentially all the different columns with all of the modifiers that we're talking about that you need to attach. So maybe you want this row is text and not null, right? You'll notice though it's separated by commas, and the last one does not get a comma. And like all of our commands, it ends with a semicolon. So let's go ahead and demo this out. We're going to use our lovely command line client to kind of go in this. So whatever your password is, go ahead and answer your password so you can follow along. Again, pause video as needed to keep up with me if I'm going too fast. So we have our basic system. Let's run through some commands first to kind of show all the different pieces that we need to oops, if I can spell today. All right, so you can see what I already have. Most of these are already built-in databases, but this allows us to know what we can use. Now we are going to create a database that's going to be called user info database, and you'll see that in a second. And we're going to use that for a lot of these examples. So if you're following along with me and you do everything that I do correctly, as we move along, we're going to be putting data in here that we will use for the rest of this course. All right, so create database, and then user info DB. All right, get our semicolon in there. So this is going to create that database user info. Notice I use my camel casing. Enter. We can show databases, and there is our user info, and it just lowercase everything, so that's fine, right? So know that user info DB is our next, or the thing we're going to be using for the rest of this, and this is why you have some of these commands, right? Show database, all that other fun stuff that we were talking about before. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to pull that so I can make sure I go over everything. First thing we're going to do is now use that database, right? So use user info DB. Right, this is why I like the camel case. It looks kind of funny, but all right. So now we're using the database that we want to do. Now, if you remember some of the other commands we have in there, right? We have show tables, explain tables. Well, if we do that right now, show tables. Right, there's no tables. So let's go ahead and create that first table. Now we can do this all in one command, but you got to be very careful as we're doing this. Now remember, the beauty of having the semicolon is that it's just going to go to the next line. So if you ever forget to use the semicolon, right, it's just going to say, okay, what do you want to do next? And you just put the semicolon. You don't have to break. You don't have to stop anything, reset anything. You just, oh, I forgot it, add it, enter, and you're good to go. Which is going to be useful as we do this new create table. And we're going to call this users. and then we're going to go ahead and not put a semicolon. We're going to put the parenthesis, right? And now, again, we want to keep writing commands, right? So we're going to create the ID first. It's going to be an integer. It's going to be not null, right? It's going to auto increment, comma. All right, so that was all we need for that one. And then we're going to do first name, because this is, remember, this is a user account, so first name. And we're going to make this text, all caps, because it's a command, right? And I did not mean to all caps first name. All right, comma, because it's not the last one. And we'll do last name, also text. Now you could also use varchar, and so if I wanted to, as an example, I could do varchar, and then last names normally are over 100 characters, so you can do something like this as well. So we'll just kind of mix it up a little bit. And then let's add a nickname, which again, some of these things I'm putting in here because they'll be useful later. And then finally, we're going to get their age, all right? And this is going to be an integer. Now, I did not null any of these because we might want to do some practice of checking for stuff is null or not later. And if we not null it, then we can't make it null. So again, as you're adding stuff to it, it'll matter. But again, this is the last one. Oh, wait, this is not the last one. Well, this is the last one we're adding. But we need to do one more thing, right? We need to set the primary key to ID. All right, now this is the last one, so we are not going to put a comma after it, but this is making the ID key. Again, we're not going to necessarily use this right now, but it will allow us later to connect to stuff. So we hit enter. If you have this, you have no errors, you're doing good. We can hit the up arrow a bunch of times so we can get to show tables. And we should see users in there, right? So that is the table we just created. Now, we'll create other tables later as we start to learn some more advanced features. And you can always go in, there's ways to alter a table, but we're not doing that in this lesson. But we are going to try that explain tables. We're going to, and then drop the table as well, and then rebuild it. All right, so let's go ahead and, well, and then we'll rebuild it for one last practice. All right, so let's do the explain table. Explain table. Check it. Oh, explain tables. Error. That's what I was wondering. Explain table user info db. Explain table exist. Oh, okay. I see what I'm doing wrong. This happens. Explain tables. Users. That's the name of our table. The fun never ends as we're going over this. There we go. Okay, sorry. I'll update that for a slideshow when you actually go to view it. So this should be explain and then the table name that you're doing it. That was interesting. But anyway, you can see this is what it does, right? So you can see ID, it's an integer, can't be null, it's the primary key. Its default value is null. However, it's auto increment, so it's really going to start at 1, right? When we add to it. First name is text. It can be null. It's not a primary key, and its default is null. Last name is that varchar 100 I was talking about, and you can see all these are yes. Age is an integer. So this just kind of shows you all the little features that you've added to the table now. All right. So the last piece is that drop table. So in this case, it's drop table and then the name of it. Now, if you run this command, it's going to delete this, and then you're going to have to go ahead and work on something. So what I'm going to show you is another thing that you can do that's very useful, and that is to go ahead and use another editor to write some of your commands. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this table. All right, so now when we do our show tables, No tables, right? No tables. So I'm going to pull over, and again, whatever editor that you have, right? In this case, I have Atom. But you can write all these commands, right? So create table users, and then I'm going to save this as user info.sql. All right, and you notice if you save it as sql.db, it'll start to add the color coordination for that. All right, so let's add all our pieces back. This will get some more practice. ID is an int, not null, and auto increment. Hope you spell it right. All right, comma, enter, and then we have our first name, and we did text, comma, last name, and we did the varchar 100, comma, and then we did nickname, text, age, an int. Remember, int is a full number, right? So you can't do 1.5 for age. If you want to do 1.5, you need to make it a double. All right, so I'll clarify that real quick as you're going through this. Int is a whole number. Last one, primary key ID. All right, no comma, that's the end of it. I can save this. And then I'm going to put my semicolon there, save it again. You can copy this and paste it back in there, click enter, and now let's go back to our show tables. We have our users, and then if we properly have the, all right, I went too far. We go back and do our explain tables correctly, right? We explain user, right? It's not explain table, it's explain the table name, so explain users, and there we go, right? This is exactly what we had before. What's nice about this, though, is you have this code for later, or if it doesn't work, right? That's another pain. If you type the commands directly into this and you have any of those wrong, you're going to get an error and you have to retype them all. So a lot of times it's really nice to do this. And we're also, as we get into inserts and other items like that, it's nice because the syntax is the same, so you just keep copying them. However, you are going to need to be careful, right? I am a huge fan of copying, but also at the same time, you need to understand what you're copying, or else you're going to get bad results. And possibly, if you copy and paste stuff, like if I copy and pasted this again and I ran it, I didn't put in the safety that you can do create table if not exist. That would help a lot not to accidentally create it again, but I'm not doing that. So again, they have all the create table. You can see there's tons of different things that you can use for it, but one of the big things is that create table if exist as you're going through and creating it. So with that, that is how you create a table. That is the different data types. So we didn't use every single one of them. You can do research on each of the main sets. But as we go through, we went over a lot of the ones we're going to do. The only other one we'll probably get into is date time. But numbers, date time stuff, characters, text, strings, and then again the modifiers. A lot of this stuff, it's good to know because you are going to forget. You are going to forget what is your name, exactly how you spell it, what type it is, because sometimes that gets you, right? You like, why didn't it accept the number or the word TEN? Well, it's an integer, right? It won't accept it. So is something not working? Do you need to add something? It's good to go in here and check what you have, what your databases are, so you can know exactly what is in there, so you can modify it, add it, again, or just forget, right? A lot of times you're like, I did F name, and it didn't work because I did first name, or sometimes you do FN, so you don't always remember what you call a field, and when you're going to do other commands, you'll run into that. Now, we'll keep doing this. We'll show tables a lot. You'll do show tables a lot when you go through your practices and challenges and projects, so get used to it. mostly for your sanity, but also, just for good practice of verifying that you did what you're supposed to do. So with that, that is the end of today's lesson. Have a good one. We will see you next time.